Welcome back to DFC Books.
Great to be diving in again.
Today we are launching into, well, an absolute cornerstone of American literature, a novel that has resonated for generations, Harper Lee's To Kill a Mockingbird.
Really has.
And we're aiming to go beyond just a simple summary today. We want to trace the intricate structure and maybe some surprising character details that you find tucked into the source material.
Absolutely. And it really is a remarkable book. I mean, it was an immediate sensation right when it came out.
Really?
Right away.
Oh, yeah. Critics loved it. The New York Times, for instance, they called it a marvelous, triumphant novel. And they specifically praised Miss Lee's gift for original characters.
Okay.
And then Harper's Magazine pointed out this unique mix it has of great sweetness, humor, compassion, and of mystery carefully sustained. Which is quite a combination, isn't it?
It really is.
Yeah.
Sweetness and mystery. It's compelling.
Yeah.
And it became this unique bestseller for a reason, didn't it? It got the Pulitzer Prize in 1961.
Yep, 61. And translated into 10 languages, became that classic film everyone knows. Right.
But Harper Lee herself, despite this masterpiece status it achieved, she apparently just considered it a simple love story.
That's fascinating. So our mission today really is to follow that journey, the journey of Jean-Louise Scout Finch and her brother Jem, and try to uncover the essential moral lessons that are kind of buried within the heat and prejudice of Macomb, Alabama. We're going to look closely at the characters, the really key event in each section of the book, and just the sheer depth of detail that makes this book, well, endure.
And I think to really get a handle on the story, we have to start at the beginning, right? At the roots, the setting, Macomb itself, and the family history that produced Atticus Finch.
Okay, so the Finch story, it doesn't actually start in Macomb, does it? It starts with Simon Finch.
That's right, Simon Finch. He was a fur-trapping apothecary, of all things, from Cornwall in England.
An apothecary, wow.
Yeah. And apparently he was a Methodist who had to leave England because he was being persecuted for his beliefs. So he came across the Atlantic looking for, religious freedom, economic opportunity, the usual reasons.
Makes sense.
But here's where it gets complicated almost immediately. There's this profound contradiction right at the start of the Finch family story. And it really foreshadows the kind of moral blind spots you see later in Macomb.
How so?
Well, Simon fled religious persecution, right? And he was supposedly committed to John Wesley's Methodist tenets, things like avoiding gold and costly apparel.
Okay.
But somehow he managed to conveniently forget Wesley's very strict rule against the possession of human chattels, owning slaves.
Ah, so despite fleeing persecution.
Exactly. He sets up Finch's Landing on the Alabama River, this self-sufficient homestead. And he builds it, quite literally, on the backs of 3 slaves he purchased.
Wow, that contradiction, as you say, it's baked right in from the start.
It is. And you see that reflected in the town Atticus eventually lives in. Atticus himself actually broke with family tradition by leaving Finch's Landing. He went off to Montgomery to read law.
Which was unusual then.
Yeah, breaking the mold.
Oh.
Then he came back to Macomb. And the book paints Macomb as this old, tired old town, especially in the 1930s when the story's set.
Right, the Depression era.
Exactly. The sources give you this really vivid picture, don't they? This oppressive heat where men's starched collars wilted by 9 in the morning. And the streets turning into red slop when it rained. But the slowness wasn't just the heat, it was economic too.
Because of the Depression.
Right. There was literally, the book says, nowhere to go, nothing to buy, and no money to buy it with.
Yeah.
Just stagnation. Atticus even remembers being told back then that the town had nothing to fear but fear itself. That famous line.
And Atticus himself, he's sort of the moral center, isn't he? The description that really stands out is he's the same in his house as he is on the public streets.
That's key. Yeah. Total integrity. He's Macomb, born and bred, related to nearly everyone apparently. Prefers walking everywhere.
A real small-town figure in that sense.
Very much so. But we also learned his character was shaped quite early on by failure.
Oh.
His very first legal clients were these 2 guys called the Haverfords. And they ended up being the last 2 people ever hanged in the Macomb County Jail.
Oh, wow. What happened?
They were just too stubborn, apparently. They killed somebody, but they refused a plea bargain for second-degree murder. They insisted their only defense was, and this is a direct quote, the son of a bitch had it coming to him.
Not exactly a legal strategy.
Not at all. And Atticus couldn't save them. Being involved in their hanging gave him this deep, lifelong distaste for criminal law.
Which makes this decision later with Tom Robinson.
Exactly. It sets the stage for just how huge a moral and professional burden that case becomes for him. He hates criminal law, but his conscience forces him to take it.
Okay, speaking of burdens and family, let's bring in the children. Starting with our narrator, Jean-Louise Finch, or Scout.
Right, Scout. She's almost 6 when the main story kicks off. She's definitely precocious. Jim, her brother, claims she's been reading ever since she was born.
Probably an exaggeration.
Probably. We also learned she lost her mother very young to a sudden heart attack when Scout was only 2.
Does she remember her?
Not really. The book says she doesn't personally feel the absence, but Jem, her older brother, definitely does.
Right, Jem. Jeremy Atticus Finch. Tell us about him.
Jem's 4 years older than Scout. And the whole novel, interestingly, is framed by looking back at how he got his arm badly broken at the elbow when he was 13.
So that injury is significant.
Hugely significant. The book promises right at the start to explain how it happened. Character-wise, Jem's the explorer, the one who takes the dares early on. But as he gets older, around 12 or so, he becomes, well, typically adolescent. Moody, feels superior to Scout, often irritatingly sure he knows everything.
Sounds about right.
Yeah. And he's really the one who has to grapple most visibly with reconciling those childhood ideas of fairness and justice with the messy realities of the adult world. He loves football, too. That's mentioned.
Okay. And their dynamic isn't complete without the third member of their trio, Dill.
Ah, Dill.
Yeah.
Charles Baker Harris. He's the summer friend, comes to stay with Miss Rachel Haverford, their neighbor, every summer.
He's younger.
He's going on 7 when he first appears, but described as quite small, puny even. But he has this massive imagination. He's really the catalyst for a lot of the early action.
Like the Boo Radley obsession.
Exactly. He's the one credited with giving Jem and Scout the initial idea of trying to make Boo Radley come out of his house. And Scout also mentions, kind of amusingly, that he later becomes her permanent fiancé.
Summer love.
Something like that. And then, of course, you absolutely cannot talk about the Finch household without Calpurnia.
Calpurnia, the cook, but so much more.
So much more. She's this unwavering presence, described as a fierce kind of surrogate mother. The book says she never let them get away with anything.
Strict but fair.
Very. Atticus deeply respects her intellect. He notes she had more education than most black people in Macomb at the time, thanks to being taught by Miss Maudie's aunt.
That's interesting.
And critically, we get these early hints of what the book calls her modest double life. She adjusts her language, her grammar, depending on who she's with. She speaks one way in the Finch home and another way when she's with her own community at church.
Showing respect for context, adapting.
Precisely. It shows incredible command and awareness. She's navigating these 2 different worlds constantly.
So this core group Scout, Jem, Dill, with Atticus and Calpurnia as the anchors their dynamic, immediately leads to that first big key event in Chapter 1, doesn't it? The Radley Dare.
Yes. The Radley place. It's just this epicenter of childhood terror and fascination for them, dominated by the mystery of Boo Radley, who they see as this malevolent phantom.
And the stories about him are pretty wild.
Oh, completely. The town gossip is dark and really elaborate. Apparently, he got into some trouble as a teenager, resisted arrest, used bad language, and his father, instead of letting him go to the state industrial school with the other boys involved, just locked him up at home.
Just kept him inside.
For years. And the legend really solidified when Boo was 33. The story goes, he was cutting items from the Macomb Tribune for a scrapbook, and he just drove the scissors into his father's leg.
Whoa!
Wiped the scissors on his pants and went right back to cutting. Just chillingly calm.
And his father still kept him home?
Well, there was talk of sending him to an asylum in Tuscaloosa, but Mr. Radley refused. Atticus apparently advised against the asylum too, but he later gravely warned the kids that Boo's father had found other ways of making people into ghosts, implying that locking someone away like that is its own kind of death.
Chilling. So that sets the stage for the dare.
Exactly. Dill, being the newcomer and maybe wanting to prove himself, bets Jem. He bets his copy of The Gray Ghost against 2 of Jem's Tom Swift books that Jem won't get any farther than the Radley front gate.
And Jem, being Jem.
Jem initially resists, but Dill kind of needles him, calls the Macomb folks scary, implying Jem is too. That's all it takes.
So he does it.
He does. He sprints past the gate, runs right up to the side of the house, slaps it hard with his palm, and then tears back as fast as he can.
Art pounding, I imagine.
Definitely.
Yeah.
And that moment, right after, is pivotal. They're back in their safe spot, catching their breath, staring at the house, and then they see it. Scout describes it as flick, a tiny, almost invisible movement, and the house was still.
An inside shudder.
They think so. It's the very first real hint that the Phantom isn't just a story. He's in there. He's capable of watching them, reacting to them. It changes everything.
Okay, so summer ends, the dill-fueled adventurers pause, and school starts. And Chapter 2 throws Scout and us right into Maycomb's social structure through the eyes of this new teacher, Miss Caroline Fisher.
Right. Miss Caroline. She's a total outsider. The book makes a point of saying she's from North Alabama, specifically Winston County.
Does that matter?
Well, yeah. Locally, it did. Winston County had tried to secede from Alabama during the Civil War because they didn't support the Confederacy. So it signals she's from a different background, maybe less tied to the Old South traditions than Maycomb is. She's just new to Maycomb's ways, completely unprepared.
And she clashes with Scout almost immediately, right? Overreading.
Instantly. She's absolutely appalled to find out Atticus has taught Scout to read. Tells Scout to stop, says she needs to undo the damage so Scout can learn the proper way in school.
Which must have been baffling for Scout.
Totally. Scout can't even remember not being able to read. And she has this realization right then. She says that until she feared she'd lose it, she never actually loved reading. It was just like breathing. Now, suddenly, it's forbidden.
And Miss Caroline's lack of understanding quickly bumps up against the realities of Maycomb poverty, doesn't it?
Yeah.
We meet the Cunninghams.
Yes, the Cunninghams. This is a key distinction the book makes. Walter Cunningham, Jr. is in Scout's class. His family's poor, really poor, because they're farmers, and the Depression hit them hard. The crash, as they call it. But crucially, they're respectable.
What defines that respectability for them?
Their integrity. The Cunninghams absolutely refuse charity. Scout explained they won't take church baskets or script stamps, government aid. They never take anything they can't pay back.
And Atticus knows this.
Yes. We learn Walter Cunningham Sr. pays Atticus for legal services not with money, because he doesn't have it, but with goods. Things like stovewood, hickory nuts, turnip greens, whatever he can provide from his farm. It's a system of barter based on honor.
So when Scout tries to explain this to Miss Caroline...
Miss Caroline completely misunderstands. She offers Walter lunch money. He refuses. Scout tries to explain why he's a Cunningham, meaning he won't take what he can't repay. But Miss Caroline hears it as Scout being rude or challenging her authority.
And Scout gets punished.
Yep. Gets her hand whipped with a ruler. Her first day, welcome to school.
Rough start. But then there's the other side of Maycomb poverty presented right after, the Ewells.
Ah, the Ewells. A completely different story. Burris Ewell is also in the class just for the first day, and Scout describes him as the filthiest human I'd ever seen.
He's the one with the cootie.
That's him. A louse crawls out of his hair, terrifying Miss Caroline. And Burris is just completely defiant. He only comes to school the first day each year to satisfy the truancy laws, and then he leaves. He's incredibly rude to Miss Caroline, calls her names, makes her cry, and storms out.
So why are they allowed to behave like that? Why doesn't the town enforce the rules with them?
Atticus has to explain this to Scout later. He basically says the Ewells are considered trash.
Yeah.
But because they live like animals, the rest of Maycomb's common folk judiciously allowed them certain privileges.
Like hunting out of season, which is mentioned?
Exactly. And skipping school. Atticus argues that if the law tried to force the Ewells into, say, regular schooling or prevent Bob Ewell from hunting when his kids were hungry, the situation would actually be worse. You might end up with starving children or more violence. So they're essentially treated as this sort of exclusive society living outside the normal rules. It's a pragmatic, if uncomfortable, concession the town makes. A stark contrast to the proud, rule-abiding Cunninghams.
That's a really clear social hierarchy laid out right there in the first few chapters. Okay, so Scout gets through that first difficult day. But then their attention starts shifting back to Boo Radley, but in a different way. Not just fear, but communication. This brings us to chapters 4 and 6 and the knothole in the oak tree.
Yes, the knothole. This is where Boo shifts from being just a scary story to someone real and maybe even kind. Scout finds the first gift, chewing gum.
Yeah.
Just sticks of Wrigley's Double Mint left in the knothole of that big oak tree on the edge of the Radley property.
She takes it.
She does, after checking it carefully. Then later, she and Jem find more things. First, a small box covered in tinfoil from gum wrappers, containing 2 polished Indian head pennies from 1906 and 1900. Treasures for kids back then.
Definitely.
Then the gifts become even more personal. A ball of gray twine. And then, the most amazing ones. 2 small soap dolls, carved precisely to look like Jem and Scout.
Wow. He carved them.
It seems so. Scout's doll even has tiny bangs carved into it. They also find a whole pack of chewing gum, a spelling bee medal, and finally a pocket watch that doesn't run on a chain with an aluminum knife.
They must realize someone is leaving these specifically for them.
They do. They figure out it has to be Boo. The detail in the soap dolls is the giveaway. They decide to write a thank you letter and leave it in the knothole.
But they don't get the chance, do they?
No. The very next day, they find the knothole has been filled with cement.
Who did that?
Mr. Nathan Radley, Boo's older brother who came back to live there after their father died. He tells Jem he plugged it up because the tree was dying.
But Jem knows better.
Jem asks Atticus about it, and Atticus says the tree looks perfectly healthy. Jem realizes immediately what happened.
Yeah.
Mr. Radley wasn't saving the tree. He was deliberately cutting off Boo's only line of communication with the outside world, with them.
That's just cruel.
It is, and Jem is deeply affected. Scout sees him standing alone on the porch, looking towards the Radley place, and realizes he's been crying. It's this quiet moment of despair for him, understanding the intentional cruelty of it.
Okay, so that connection is severed, but the kid's fascination doesn't stop, which leads to the infamous raid in Chapter 6.
Right. Dill's back for the summer, or rather, it's Dill's last night before heading back to Meridian, and they decide to try one last thing. Peek in the Radley window.
Risky.
Very. They sneak into the backyard under cover of darkness. Jem lifts Dill up to look in a side window, but he sees nothing. They try the back window, creeping onto the porch, and then a shadow falls across Jem.
Ooh.
They don't know. They just see the shape of a man. They panic, run, and then hear it. The blast of a shotgun.
Someone shot at them.
Mr. Nathan Radley fired into the air, he says later, to scare off a prowler. He claims it was a black man. In the chaos of scrambling under the fence to escape, Jem gets his pants caught on the wire. He has to kick them off and leave them behind to get away.
Oh, man. So he has to go back for them.
He has to. He can't explain losing his pants. Later that night, despite Scout begging him not to, Jem sneaks back alone to retrieve them.
And what he finds is strange, right?
Very strange and profoundly unsettling for Jem. He finds his pants not tangled in the fence, but neatly folded across the top wire. Like they were expecting me, he tells Scout. And even weirder, they've been mended. Badly, crookedly sewn up, but someone had tried to fix the tear.
Boo. It had to be Boo.
That's what Jem concludes. Someone inside that house knew he'd be back for his pants, knew he'd be in trouble if he didn't have them, and tried to help him. Folded them, fixed them. Jem is really unnerved by this, Scout says. It's like someone was reading his mind, anticipating his needs in this quiet, almost ghostly way.
That hidden kindness, that silent watching. It continues, doesn't it, in Chapter 8 with the snow?
Yes, the freak snowfall. The first time Maycomb has seen snow since 1885. It causes total chaos. School is canceled.
And then Mr. Avery blames the kids.
He does. Mr. Avery, this grumpy neighbor, tells Jem and Scout that bad children like them make the seasons change. He quotes something about the Rosetta Stone, saying it proves that when children disobey their parents, smoke cigarettes, and make war on each other, the seasons get distorted.
Seriously?
Seriously. And Jem and Scout, still feeling guilty about all their Radley-related misbehavior, actually feel kind of responsible for the snow.
Kids take things so literally, so what do?
They decide to make a snowman, which is hard because there isn't that much snow. They have to use basketfuls of dirt for the base and then cover it with a thin layer of snow they scraped together from their yard and Miss Maudie's.
A mud man covered in snow.
Essentially. And their first version is, well, it's a dead ringer for Mr. Avery. Scout says Jem made him fat in the middle and little bitty arms. Atticus comes out, sees it, and while he's amused, he tells them they can't just go around making caricatures of the neighbors. It's disrespectful. He tells Jem to disguise it.
How do they disguise him?
Cleverly. Jem borrows Miss Maudie Atkinson's sun hat and her hedge clippers. He puts the hat on the snowman and sticks the clippers in its hand, transforming it from Mr. Avery into a likeness of Miss Maudie herself, pottering in her garden. Atticus approves. It's another subtle lesson about perception and representation.
But that night, something much more serious happens.
Yes. That night, Miss Maudie's house catches fire. It's a huge event. The whole neighborhood is out watching, trying to help save furniture. The fire truck struggles in the cold. It's terrifying.
And Scout is just watching.
She and Jem are standing out in the cold, watching the flames, positioned by Atticus safely down near the Radley gate. Scout is freezing. Later, back inside their own house, after the fire is under control, Atticus notices something. Scout is wrapped in a thick brown woolen blanket that isn't theirs. She has no idea how it got there. She was so absorbed by the fire, she didn't feel anyone put it around her shoulders.
And Jem figures it out.
Jem puts it all together. The mended pants, the gifts in the tree, and now this blanket appearing silently while everyone else was focused on the fire. He realizes Boo Radley must have slipped out of the house and put it around Scout without her noticing.
Wow. He came out.
He came out, performed this act of quiet care, and disappeared again. It confirms he's not a monster, but this incredibly shy, perhaps damaged, but ultimately kind person watching over them.
And Miss Maudie's reaction to losing her house.
Remarkably resilient. She seems almost cheerful the next day. Tells the kids she always hated that big old house anyway. Says she's glad it burned down, now she'll have more room for her azaleas.
Amazing strength.
It really is. Her quiet acceptance contrasts sharply with the drama of the fire and the silent mystery of Boo's actions. It shows another kind of Maycomb strength.
Okay, so after these encounters with hidden kindness and community drama, the story really starts to zero in on Atticus and the central conflict. Chapter 9 is where it becomes explicit.
Yes, this is where we learn formally about the case. Atticus has been appointed to defend Tom Robinson.
Tom Robinson being?
A black man, a member of Calpurnia's church, First Purchase, AME Zion, and he's been accused by Bob Ewell, Bob Ewell, of raping his daughter, Mayella.
An explosive accusation in that time and place.
Absolutely. And Atticus knows it. He tells Scout he knows they have almost no chance of winning. He says he has everything to lose personally and professionally, but he has to take the case.
Why? Why does he feel he has to?
For his own integrity. He tells Scout, before I can live with other folks, I've got to live with myself. The one thing that doesn't abide by majority rule is a person's conscience. He couldn't hold his head up, couldn't even tell his own children what to do anymore if he didn't take this case.
That's powerful, but it immediately causes problems for the kids, right?
Immediately. The schoolyard taunts start. And then it really boils over at the Finch family's traditional Christmas gathering at Finch's Landing.
It happens there.
Scout's cousin, Francis Hancock, Aunt Alexandra's grandson, starts taunting her. He repeats what he's heard Aunt Alexandra saying and calls Atticus he uses that vile slur, nigger lover.
Oh, no.
And Scout, who Atticus had told to keep her fist down and her head high, just snaps. She punches Frances square in the mouth, splits her knuckle doing it.
And Uncle Jack steps in, Atticus's brother.
Yeah, Uncle Jack, the doctor brother. He comes running, sees Frances crying, assumes Scout is entirely at fault, and punishes her, spanks her, without even asking for her side of the story.
Which Scout calls him out on later.
She does. Later that night, she confronts Uncle Jack. She points out he didn't listen to her, he didn't act fairly. She basically teaches him a lesson about understanding a child's perspective and getting all the facts.
And he accepts it.
He does. He's ashamed and apologizes, bandages her hurt knuckle. She makes him promise not to tell Atticus the real reason she hit Frances, because she doesn't want Atticus to know she let him down by fighting.
So even in her anger, she's trying to protect Atticus's feelings.
Exactly. And later, Scout overhears Atticus talking to Uncle Jack, explaining why he took the case and hoping he can get his children through it without them catching Maycomb's usual disease of prejudice. He also tells Jack that responding to insults like nigger lover just gives them power. He says it's never an insult to be called what somebody thinks is a bad name. You just have to consider the source.
More wisdom from Atticus. Okay, so that's the moral courage of conviction. But then Chapter 10 gives us a very different, very sudden display of, a different kind of skill from Atticus. The mad dog incident.
Ah, Tim Johnson. Yes. This is really dramatic scenes. A local dog, Tim Johnson, is seen staggering down the main street, clearly rabid, which was terrifying back then. Absolutely fatal.
And Calpurnia reacts instantly.
She does. She recognizes the signs immediately, bundles the kids inside, calls Atticus at his office, and starts frantically calling other neighbors to warn them to stay indoors. Utter panic.
Atticus comes home and the sheriff, Heck Tate, arrives too.
Right. Heck Tate gets there with a rifle, but the dog is getting dangerously close. It's reached the Radley place, actually. And the angle is awkward for Heck. He knows he might miss or the bullet might ricochet. He basically shoves the rifle at Atticus.
Why Atticus?
Heck insists Atticus has to take the shot. He says it's a one-shot job. Atticus protests, says he hasn't fired a gun in 30 years. But Heck insists.
Atticus.
Atticus takes the rifle, adjusts his glasses, takes aim, and drops the dog with a single perfect shot right through the head from a considerable distance. Clean kill.
The kids must have been stunned.
Completely gobsmacked. They had no idea their father, who reads books and wears glasses, had this skill.
And that's when they find out his old nickname.
Yes. Miss Maudie tells them later. When Atticus was young, he was known as Old One-Shot Finch. He was the deadliest shot in Maycomb County.
So why did he give it up? Why hide it?
Miss Maudie explains that too. Atticus realized, she says, that God had given him an unfair advantage over most living things. He decided he wouldn't shoot unless he absolutely had to. He felt marksmanship wasn't something to be proud of, it was just a tool, and a potentially unfair one.
So true courage isn't about skill with a weapon.
Exactly what Miss Maudie tells Jem. She says, I think maybe he put his gun down when he realized that God had given him an unfair advantage over most living things. I guess he decided he wouldn't shoot till he had to, and he had to today. Then she adds that crucial line. Courage is not a man with a gun in his hand. It's something else entirely.
Which leads perfectly into Chapter 11 and probably the most challenging definition of courage in the whole book, Mrs. Dubose.
Mrs. Henry Lafayette Dubose, oh yes. The neighborhood's notoriously mean old lady. She sits on her porch yelling insults at Jem and Scout whenever they pass.
And she says awful things about Atticus taking the case.
Horrible things. Vicious insults about him defending Tom Robinson. One day, Jem just loses it. He takes a baton he just bought for Scout, runs into Mrs. Dubose's yard and destroys all her prized camellia bushes. Just snaps every single head off.
Whoa! Atticus must have been furious.
He was deeply disappointed. And Jem's punishment is severe.
Yeah.
He has to go apologize to Mrs. Dubose in person, and then he has to go to her house every afternoon after school and on Saturdays and read aloud to her for 2 hours.
Read to her while she's sick in bed.
Yes. And it's torture for Jem. Scout goes with him. Mrs. Dubose is frail, often drifts off, but then she'll have these strange, horrifying fits where she drools and her head thrashes. An alarm clock rings after a set time each day, and her nurse shoos the children out. But Jem notices the reading times get longer and longer each day before the alarm goes off.
What's happening during those fits?
They don't know at the time. It's just scary and unpleasant. They endure it for about a month. Then, shortly after the punishment ends, Mrs. Dubose dies.
And Atticus reveals the truth.
Yes. Atticus explains to Jem that Mrs. Dubose was addicted to morphine. She'd been prescribed it for years for pain from her illness. It was a legal medical addiction.
So the fits were withdrawal.
Exactly. Atticus reveals that Mrs. Dubose knew she was dying, and she was determined, absolutely determined, to break her addiction before she died. She wanted to leave the world beholden to nothing and nobody. The reading sessions were part of her strategy to distract herself, to push through the withdrawal symptoms for longer periods each day.
Wow. She chose to go through that agony.
She chose it. She knew she was going to die, but she wanted to die free. Atticus sends Jem a perfect white camellia blossom that Mrs. Dubose had asked her nurse to prepare for him before she passed.
A peace offering. Or something more.
Atticus explains it's a symbol of her courage. He tells Jem he wanted him to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is just a man with a gun. He says Mrs. Dubose was the bravest person he ever knew.
And that's where he gives that famous definition.
That's it. I wanted you to see what real courage is, instead of getting the idea that courage is a man with a gun in his hand. It's when you know you're licked before you begin, but you begin anyway, and you see it through no matter what. You rarely win, but sometimes you do. Mrs. Dubose won. She died beholden to nothing and nobody. She was the bravest person I ever knew.
That's incredibly profound. Bravery as enduring private suffering, fighting a battle you know you'll likely lose, but fighting it anyway for your own integrity.
Precisely. It sets an almost impossibly high bar for courage.
Yeah.
And it directly informs how we should view Atticus's own fight in the courtroom. He knows he's licked before he begins, but he begins anyway and sees it through.
It does raise a question, though. Does framing Mrs. Dubose's private battle as the ultimate bravery somehow diminish the very real public risk Atticus is taking? He's facing potential violence, community hatred.
That's a fair question.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think the sources suggest it diminishes Atticus. I think it shows courage has many facets. Mrs. Dubose's is internal, against herself. Atticus's is external, against the community, but rooted in that same internal integrity. The book seems to be saying both are essential forms of bravery. Atticus needs that internal Dubose-like fortitude to face the very physical threat of the mob later on. You need both the moral conviction and the willingness to put yourself on the line.
Okay, so the kids are definitely growing up. Jem hits 12 in chapter 12, and the book says he becomes moody and superior, classic preteen.
Yeah, the dynamic shifts, and Atticus is often away during this period, called to the state legislature in Montgomery. So Calpurnia is firmly in charge at home.
And she decides to take the kids somewhere new, to her church.
Exactly. One Sunday, she takes Jem and Scout with her to First Purchase African M.E. Zion Church. It's described as an ancient paint-peeled frame building, the only church in Macomb with a steeple and bell. And it was paid for from the first earnings of freed slaves, hence the name First Purchase.
What's the experience like for Jem and Scout? Is it welcoming?
Mostly, yes. But there's this one moment of tension right at the start. A tall black woman named Lula confronts Calpurnia on the church steps.
What does she say?
She's angry. She challenges Calpurnia, asking why she's bringing white chillin' to nigger church. She says they have their own church. It's this uncomfortable moment of reverse prejudice almost.
How does Calpurnia handle it?
Calpurnia stands her ground completely. She tells Lula the children are her guests and basically says, it's the same God, ain't it? She refuses to be intimidated. And thankfully, the rest of the congregation steps in and welcomes Jem and Scout warmly. Zebo, Calpurnia's son, makes a point of greeting them.
Zebo. He's important inside the church, isn't he?
He is, because most of the congregation can't read. So when they sing hymns, they use a method called lining.
Lining. What's that?
Zebo, who is one of only 4 people in the congregation who can read, and was taught by Calpurnia from a book given to her by the kid's grandfather, reads or sings one line of the hymn, and the congregation repeats back. It's this communal way of participating in the service when literacy is scarce. Scout is fascinated by it.
That's incredible. And the collection plate takes on special significance, too.
Yes. Reverend Sykes announces the collection that day is for Helen Robinson, Tom Robinson's wife. He's very direct. She has children. She can't find work because of the accusation against Tom, and she needs $10.
And he makes sure they get it.
Oh, yeah. When the collection comes up short, Reverend Sykes actually locks the church doors. He says nobody is leaving until they have the full $10 needed for Helen. He even calls out specific people he thinks can afford more. It's this act of intense community pressure and support.
And this is where Scout learns exactly what Tom is accused of.
Right. During the service, she learns the specific charge, raping Mayella Ewell, and she connects it back to Atticus calling the Ewells absolute trash. The pieces start clicking into place for her.
After church, Scout asks Calpurnia about something she noticed, her way of speaking.
Yes. Scout asks Calpurnia why she talks differently at church, why she uses what Scout calls nigger talk when she knows how to speak properly, like she does in the Finch house.
And Calpurnia's explanation is really insightful.
It is. Calpurnia explains it's about fitting in, about not putting on airs. She says it would be out of place for her to speak white folks talk at church. People would think she was acting superior. She tells Scout, folks don't like to have somebody around knowing more than they do. It aggravates them. She basically acknowledges she commands 2 languages and uses them appropriately in their different contexts. It underlines that modest double life she leads.
That understanding of different worlds is immediately contrasted when Aunt Alexandra arrives, doesn't it? Around chapter 13.
Absolutely. And Alexandra, Atticus's sister, arrives with her suitcase, announcing she's come to stay for a while. Her reasoning. She and Atticus decided it was time the children had some feminine influence.
But her real agenda seems to be about something else. Background.
Exactly. And Alexandra is obsessed with heredity and family history. She believes the Finches have background, and the children need to be constantly reminded of their family's standing and behave accordingly. She wants to instill in them a sense of their place within Maycomb's rigid social hierarchy.
And she fits right into Maycomb society.
Perfectly. Like a hand into a glove. She joins the missionary circle, becomes secretary of the Maycomb Amanuensis Club, knows all the gossip, understands the intricate caste system completely. The book notes even Mr. Nathan Radley comes out to his front yard to greet her, which is saying something. She represents traditional Maycomb values.
And this immediately creates friction, especially regarding Calpurnia.
Big time. Aunt Alexandra is horrified by the idea of Scout wanting to visit Calpurnia's home. She even suggests Atticus should let Calpurnia go.
What does Atticus say?
Atticus puts his foot down firmly. He tells Alexandra that Calpurnia is part of the family, that she's been harder on the kids in some ways than a mother might have been, and that the children love her. He says Calpurnia isn't leaving until she wants to leave. It's a rare moment of Atticus directly confronting his sister's prejudice.
The tension spills over between Jem and Scout, too.
It does. Jem, full of his new 12-year-old maddening superiority, tries to tell Scout how to behave, echoing Aunt Alexandra's views. He even threatens to spank her if she antagonizes Auntie. Scout flies at him, and they have a real physical fight.
So things are pretty tense in the Finch house, and then Dill shows up unexpectedly.
Yeah, talk about adding to the drama. Scout finds Dill hiding under her bed one night. He's run away from his home in Meridian.
Why did he run away?
He felt neglected. His mother had remarried, and he felt his new father and his mother weren't interested in him, didn't spend time with him. He says they bought him things but didn't really want him around. So he took a train, walked, and hitched a ride on a cotton wagon to get back to Maycomb, back to Jem and Scout.
And Jem does something significant then, something that shows he's growing up.
He does. After the initial excitement, Jay makes a decision. He goes and tells Atticus that Dill is there. Scout sees this as a betrayal. Jem, break the remaining code of our childhood. But it's clearly Jem recognizing that running away is serious, that an adult needs to know. It's him crossing that line from childhood conspiracy into adult responsibility.
Okay, so all these tensions, racial with the trial looming, social with Aunt Alexandra, personal with Dill running away, they all seem to converge in Chapter 15, the confrontation at the jail.
This is arguably one of the most powerful scenes in the book. It's the night before the trial is set to begin. Atticus senses trouble, that maybe some people might try to harm Tom Robinson. So he goes down to the Macomb jail and sits outside reading under the bare light bulb by the door, just quietly guarding his client.
He expects a mob.
He clearly suspects something. And sure enough, late at night, several cars pull up. A group of men gets out, their unfamiliar faces to Scout, rough-looking men from out in the county, old Sarum, the same area the Cunninghams are from, and they're there for Tom.
To lynch him.
That's the clear intention. They tell Atticus to move aside. He refuses. The situation is incredibly tense, very dangerous. These men smell of stale whiskey. Atticus is alone against them.
But then the kids show up.
Unbelievably, yes. Jem, worried about Atticus, sneaks out of the house, and Scout and Dill follow him. They run downtown and find Atticus facing down this group of strangers.
What happens when the men see the children?
Atticus is terrified for them. He tells Jem to take Scout and Dill home immediately. Jem, in another act of defiance and burgeoning maturity, refuses to leave his father. One of the men roughly grabs Jem.
And Scout reacts.
Scout kicks the man who grabbed Jem. Then, in the sudden silence, she does something extraordinary. She scans the crowd, looking for a familiar face. And she spots one, Mr. Cunningham, Walter Cunningham's father.
The man who pays Atticus in hickory nuts.
The very same.
Yeah.
And Scout, being Scout, just tries to be polite. She has no real grasp of the deadly seriousness of the situation. She starts talking to him.
About what?
About his son, Walter. "Hey, Mr. Cunningham," she says. She asks how his entailment is getting along, that legal issue Atticus helped him with. She reminds him that Walter is in her class, that he's a good boy. She just keeps talking this innocent, one-sided conversation about school and crops and entailments.
And the effect is stunning.
It completely shatters the mob mentality. Scout's innocent, direct address forces Mr. Cunningham to see himself not as part of an anonymous, angry mob, but as an individual, as Walter's father. As a man, Atticus has helped. She makes him, as Scout reflects later, stand in my shoes for a minute.
He can't go through with it.
I can't. He squats down, looks at Scout, and tells her very quietly, "I'll tell him you said, hey, little miss." Then he stands up and tells the mob, "Let's clear out. Let's get going, boys." And they just leave.
Wow. A little girl disarms a lynch mob with polite conversation.
It's incredible. Atticus later says it proves that even a gang of wild animals can be stopped, simply because they're still human. Scout appealed to that shred of humanity in Mr. Cunningham, and it worked. It's a testament to innocence, but also to the power of recognizing individual connection, even in the face of collective hatred.
So the trial begins. The atmosphere must be electric.
Absolutely. The whole town seems to converge on the courthouse. It's hot, crowded. Jem, Scout, and Dill can't find seats downstairs in the white section.
Where do they end up sitting?
Reverend Sykes, the pastor from Calpurnia's church, sees them and takes them upstairs to the colored balcony. They get front row seats there as 4 black men give up their places for them. It's a significant placement. They will witness the trial from the perspective of the black community.
And from up there, they notice someone else who doesn't quite fit the mold. Mr. Dolphus Raymond.
Yes, Mr. Raymond. He's a wealthy white man who prefers the company of black people. He lives with a black common-law wife and has mixed-race children. He's seen sitting with the black community outside the courthouse.
And he has a reputation for being a drunk, right?
That's the town gossip. He's always seen sipping from a paper sack, supposedly containing whiskey. People use his supposed alcoholism to explain his unconventional life choices. It makes him understandable, pitiable in their eyes.
But there's a secret there.
There is, which Dill and Scout discover later. We'll come back to that. For now, the trial starts. Sheriff Hecate testifies first, then Bob Ewell takes the stand in Chapter 17.
Bob Ewell, how is he described?
As a little bantam cock of a man. Cocky, ignorant, crude. The description of his home life is stark. They live behind the town garbage dump in an old cabin, surviving on welfare checks, which he mostly spends on alcohol.
But there's that one detail about the geraniums.
Yes, that's important. Amidst the squalor and junk in the Ewell yard, there's one spot of incongruous beauty. 6 chipped enamel slop jars filled with brilliant red geraniums. And the book notes they are cared for by Maella. It's this tiny sign of her yearning for something better, some order or beauty in her grim existence.
Okay, so Ewell testifies. What's his story?
He claims he heard Mayella screaming, ran to the house, looked in the window, and saw Tom Robinson raping her. He says he ran inside and Tom ran off. His testimony is full of racist assumptions and contradictions.
And Atticus's cross-examination focuses on one key point.
Yes. Atticus asks Ewell to write his name, and Ewell signs it with his left hand. Atticus establishes firmly that Bob Ewell is left-handed.
Why does that matter?
Because Sheriff Tate had testified earlier that Mayella's injuries, bruises, a black eye, were primarily on the right side of her face and around her neck. Atticus is planting the seed. A left-handed attacker would most likely inflict injuries on the victim's right side.
Suggesting Ewell himself could have beaten Mayella.
Precisely. It casts immediate doubt on Ewell's story and hints at a different narrative.
Then Mayella takes the stand in Chapter 18. How does she come across?
She's 19, described as looking fragile, like she tries to keep clean but is clearly impoverished and uneducated. She seems terrified, almost like a steady-eyed cat with a twitchy tail.
And she thinks Atticus is mocking her.
Yes. His polite forms of address, calling her ma'am and Miss Mayella, are so unfamiliar to her, so different from how she's usually treated, that she thinks he's making fun of her low social standing. She gets defensive and hostile. Jem whispers to Scout that she seems to be trying, consciously or not, to make the judge and jury feel sorry for her.
What's her version of events?
She claims she asked Tom Robinson to come inside the yard and bust up an old shift robe, a piece of furniture for her, offered him a nickel, and then he attacked her from behind, choked her, beat her, and raped her.
But Atticus's questioning reveals inconsistencies.
Big ones. He asks about her injuries, why she didn't scream earlier, why no other children were around. Her story keeps shifting. Then comes the dramatic climax of her testimony. Atticus asks her point blank if it was actually her father who beat her up. Mayella refuses to answer, glares at Tom Robinson, and then bursts into tears, refusing to say anything more.
And then Atticus asks Tom Robinson to do something.
Yes. As Mayella's crying, Atticus quietly asks Tom Robinson to stand up so Mayella can identify him clearly. And Tom stands.
And everyone sees his arm.
Everyone sees it. Tom Robinson's left arm is fully 12 inches shorter than his right. It's completely useless, hangs dead at his side. He got it caught in a cotton gin when he was a boy, tearing all the muscles loose from the bone.
Meaning he couldn't possibly have choked and beaten Mayella the way she described, especially not causing injuries mainly on her right side with only his functional right hand.
Exactly. The physical evidence is undeniable. Tom Robinson could not have inflicted those injuries. It visually demolishes Mayella's testimony.
So Tom testifies next in Chapter 19. What's his side of the story?
Tom speaks calmly, respectfully. He says he often passed the Ewell place, and Mayella would frequently ask him to help her with small chores, chopping kindling, fetching water. He always refused payment.
Why did he help her?
He explains that he felt sorry for her. He saw that her father didn't help her, that she seemed to be trying to manage the household and the younger children all alone. He says Mr. Ewell didn't seem to help her none.
And on the day in question?
He says Mayella called him inside the fence, saying she needed help fixing a door hinge inside the house. When he got inside, there was no broken hinge. The other children were gone. She'd saved up nickels to send them for ice cream. Then she asked him to get something down from the top of the shift rope. When he stood on a chair, she grabbed his legs. He almost fell, and then she started hugging him and kissing him, telling him to kiss her back.
She initiated everything.
According to Tom, yes. He says he was terrified, trying to push her away gently, told her he had to leave. Just then, Bob Ewell appeared at the window, saw them, and started yelling vile threats at Mayella about what he was going to do to her. Tom says he just ran. He didn't want any trouble.
A completely different narrative. Plausible, especially given the physical evidence. But then comes the cross-examination by the prosecutor, Mr. Gilmer. And Tom makes a crucial mistake.
A fatal mistake, born of simple honesty. Mr. Gilmer presses Tom hard on why he would help Mayella so much for free. Why would he chop kindling for her? And Tom says, quietly and sincerely, I felt right sorry for her. She seemed to try more than the rest of them.
He felt sorry for a white woman.
Bingo. In that courtroom, in that society, a black man expressing pity for a white woman, even a desperately poor one like Mayella, was completely taboo. It implies a sense of superiority, a violation of the racial hierarchy. Scout observes, the damage was done. Below us, nobody liked Tom Robinson's answer.
It seals his fate, regardless of the evidence.
It seems to. That simple, honest statement crystallizes the prejudice of the jury.
And this is the point where Dill gets upset.
Yes. Dill suddenly starts crying uncontrollably. He can't stand the way Mr. Gilmer was talking to Tom, sneering at him, calling him boy. He tells Scout it just made him sick. Simple hell people give other people without even thinking. It's the blatant injustice, the cruelty of it that overwhelms him.
So they take Dill outside, and they run into Mr. Dolphus Raymond again.
They do, and Mr. Raymond offers Dill a sip from his paper sack to settle his stomach. Scout warns him it's whiskey, but Dill tries it and discovers
It's just Coca-Cola.
just Coke. Mr. Raymond reveals his secret. He explains he pretends to be drunk because it gives people an excuse or reason they can understand for why he chooses to live the way he does, preferring the company of black folks. He says people couldn't handle the truth that he just genuinely prefers it that way. He tells the kids, cry about the simple hell people give other people without even thinking. Cry about the hell white people give colored folks without even stopping to think that they're people too.
Another layer of Maycomb's complex social facade peeled back. Okay, back in the courtroom, Atticus gives his closing argument in Chapter 20.
And it's a masterpiece of logic and appeal to conscience. He recaps the evidence, highlighting the lack of medical proof, the conflicting testimonies, Tom's obvious physical inability to commit the crime as described.
And he directly addresses the racial prejudice.
He does. He argues that the case is fundamentally simple. Mayella Ewell, tempted by loneliness and desire, broke a rigid and time-honored code of our society by making advances towards a black man. When caught by her father, she tried to destroy the evidence of her offense, Tom Robinson, to cover her own guilt and shame. Bob Ewell likely beat her in his rage.
And he appeals to the jury's duty.
He reminds them that while courts may have their faults, in theory, they are the great levelers. In the courtroom, all men are created equal. He begs the jury to look past the racist assumptions, to do their duty based on the evidence, and acquit Tom Robinson. It's a powerful plea.
But ultimately, in Chapter 21, it fails.
It fails. The jury stays out for a long time, which Atticus later sees as a tiny sign of progress. Usually, it would have been instant.
Yeah.
But when they return, Scout notices something chilling. Not a single juror looks at Tom Robinson as they file back in. She knows instinctively what that means.
Guilty.
Guilty.
Mm-hmm.
The foreman reads the verdict. Jem is physically shaken, muttering, no, no. His belief in the system is shattered.
But then comes that incredibly moving moment as Atticus leaves.
Yes. Atticus closes his briefcase, whispers something to Tom, and starts walking down the center aisle alone. As he passes, everyone in the colored balcony, every single person, silently stands up.
As a sign of respect.
And profound sign of respect and gratitude for his effort, even though he lost. Reverend Sykes, sitting with the children, leans over and tells Scout, Miss Jean-Louise, stand up. Your father's passing. It's a heartbreaking but deeply affirming moment about Atticus's moral standing in their eyes.
So the verdict is in, guilty. Chapter 22 starts the very next morning. How is the Finch household processing this?
Well, Jim is utterly devastated. He cried himself out the night before. He just can't understand how the jury could convict Tom with such clear evidence of his innocence. His faith in Maycomb in justice is broken.
But there's a surprising reaction from the black community.
Yes. When Calpurnia goes into the kitchen that morning, she finds the back steps loaded with food. Chicken, rolls, salt pork, tomatoes, beans, even pickled pig's knuckles. It's an outpouring of gratitude from the black community for Atticus defending Tom, even in defeat.
How does Atticus react to that?
He's deeply moved, his eyes fill with tears. He tells Calpurnia to thank them, but to tell them never to do it again because times are too hard. He understands the sacrifice involved. Miss Maudie later calls it paying the highest tribute they could.
But not everyone is feeling grateful. Bob Ewell reacts very differently.
Oh, yeah. Later that day, Bob Ewell confronts Atticus on the post office corner. He spits right in Atticus's face.
No.
Yep. Spits on him, curses him, and threatens to kill him.
What does Atticus do? He must have been furious.
According to the kids, Atticus doesn't even flinch. He just stands there, lets Ewell yell, then calmly takes out his handkerchief, wipes his face, and says quietly, "No, too old," implying he's too old to fight Ewell. Then he just walks away.
Incredible restraint. Does he think that's the end of it?
He tries to reassure the terrified Jem and Scout. He says he thinks Ewell just needed to vent his anger, get it out of his system. He figures Ewell got his revenge by destroying Tom's life, and now maybe he'll leave it alone. Atticus says he'd rather it be me than that house full of children out there. He seriously underestimates just how vile and vengeful Bob Ewell really is.
Jem remains deeply troubled by the verdict, though, doesn't he? He's really struggling in Chapter 23.
He is. He's disillusioned with the whole town, with the legal system. He and Atticus have a long talk about how the jury system works, about prejudice. Jem just can't wrap his head around the injustice.
Miss Maudie tries to offer some comfort.
She does. She has the kids over for cake and tries to put things in perspective. She points out that Atticus isn't alone. There were people in Macomb like herself, like Judge Taylor, who intentionally appointed Atticus, who believed in fairness and trusted Atticus to do the right thing. She says Atticus is one of the people born to do our unpleasant jobs for us. It's a small comfort, but it shows Jem that not everyone in Macomb is prejudiced.
And this leads Jem to a really insightful but sad conclusion about Boo Radley.
Yes, after wrestling with why people are so hateful, why Macomb is the way it is, Jem says maybe there's just one kind of folks. But then he immediately qualifies it, realizing the divisions are real. And then he makes this connection. Scout, I think I'm beginning to understand something. I think I'm beginning to understand why Boo Radley stayed shut up in the house all this time. It's because he wants to stay inside.
Wow. The injustice and ugliness of the world, as shown by the trial, makes staying hidden seem like a rational choice.
Exactly. Jem finally understands Boo, not as a monster or a phantom, but as someone who has perhaps made a conscious decision to withdraw from a world that seems cruel and senseless. It's a profoundly pessimistic but maybe accurate insight for a boy his age.
The hypocrisy of Macomb society is really put under the microscope in Chapter 24 during one of Anne Alexandra's Missionary Society meetings.
Oh, that scene is brilliant. You have these supposedly devout Christian ladies gathered in Atticus's living room, sipping tea, discussing the plight of the poor Maruna tribe in Africa. Mrs. Grace Merriweather is leading the discussion, weeping over the Marunas' ignorance and squalor.
But then she turns her attention closer to home.
Right. In the next breath, she starts complaining about her own black cook being sulky since the Tom Robinson trial. And then she makes these thinly veiled criticisms of Atticus, saying there are some good but misguided people in this town who think they're doing right, but are actually just stirring up the black community.
The hypocrisy is just staggering.
It's breathtaking.
Yeah.
Caring about injustice oceans away while perpetuating it in her own kitchen and community.
Does anyone challenge her?
Miss Maudie does. Quietly but devastatingly. When Mrs. Merriweather makes another snide remark aimed at Atticus, Miss Maudie fixes her with a cold stare and asks, his food doesn't stick going down, does it?
Oof. Mic drop.
Pretty much. Pointing out that Mrs. Merriweather is happy to eat the food provided by the man she's implicitly criticizing, enjoying the safety and comfort of his home while bad-mouthing his principles. It shuts Mrs. Merriweather right up. Scout observes that Aunt Alexandra gives Miss Maudie a look of pure gratitude. Even Auntie recognizes the hypocrisy.
But then real tragedy intrudes on the tea party.
Yes. Atticus comes home unexpectedly. He looks grim. He asks Alexandra to come into the kitchen with him, along with Scout, Miss Maudie, and Calpurnia.
What's the news?
It's devastating. Tom Robinson is dead.
Oh, no. How?
He was in the prison exercise yard. He suddenly made a run for the fence, started climbing it. The guards yelled for him to stop, fired warning shots, and then they shot him 17 times.
17 bullets. That's excessive.
Grossly excessive. Atticus explains Tom was shot during the exercise period. He believes Tom just lost hope. He was tired of white men's chances and preferred to take his own. He just couldn't face the prospect of rotting in prison for a crime he didn't commit. He chose his own ending, however fatal.
How does Aunt Alexandra react? She's often seemed critical of Atticus.
She's heartbroken. Not just for Tom, but for Atticus. She sees the toll this is taking on her brothers. She cries out, they're perfectly willing to let him do what they're too afraid to do themselves. Tear him to pieces. She finally sees the burden the town has placed on him.
Atticus has to go tell Helen Robinson.
Yes. He asks Calpurnia to come with him. A terrible duty.
Time passes. Scout starts 3rd grade. And in Chapter 26, she encounters hypocrisy again, this time from her teacher, Miss Gates.
Right. Miss Gates is teaching the class about Nazi Germany and Hitler's persecution of the Jews. She talks about democracy versus dictatorship, saying, over here, we don't believe in persecuting anybody. Persecution comes from people who are prejudiced.
Sounds reasonable enough.
Yeah, it does. But then Scout remembers something. She remembers seeing Miss Gates leaving the courthouse after Tom Robinson was convicted. And she clearly heard Miss Gates saying to another woman how it was time somebody taught him a lesson. They were getting way above themselves, and the next thing they think they can do is marry us.
Talking about the black community, the exact prejudice she's condemning in her classroom.
Exactly. The blatant contradiction shocks Scout. She tries to ask Jem about it later, how someone can hate Hitler so much but be so ugly about people right here at home. But Jem reacts furiously. He still hasn't processed the trial, doesn't want to think about it. It shows the lingering trauma.
Okay, so the shadow of the trial still hangs heavy. And Bob Ewell hasn't gone away. Chapter 27 brings him back into focus.
Yes. We learned Ewell actually got a job with the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, a New Deal program. But he was fired within days for laziness. He blames Atticus for getting his job.
Which is ridiculous.
Completely. He also starts harassing Helen Robinson, Tom's widow, following her to work, muttering threats. Link DS, Tom's former employer, has to intervene and threaten Ewell to make him stop. There are other signs Ewell is unstable, like someone trying to break into Judge Taylor's house one night. People suspect it was Ewell.
He's clearly unhinged and looking for revenge, which sets the stage for Halloween night.
Yes. Maycomb decides to have an organized Halloween pageant that year to prevent the usual pranks. It's held in the school auditorium. Mrs. Merriweather writes and directs it an agricultural pageant called Maycomb County ad astra per aspera.
As Scout has a role?
A starring role, after a fashion. She's chosen to represent pork. She has this elaborate, cumbersome costume made of chicken wire, shaped like a ham, covered in painted brown cloth.
A walking ham.
Pretty much. It's bulky she could barely see out of it. Atticus and Anne Alexander are too tired to go, so Jem escorts Scout to the pageant.
And Scout misses her cue.
Hilariously, yes. She's waiting backstage in her ham costume. It's dark and warm, and she falls asleep. She completely misses her entrance when all the county's agricultural products are supposed to parade onto the stage. Mrs. Merriweather is furious, tells Scout she ruined the pageant.
Oh dear. Scout must have been mortified.
Deeply embarrassed. So much so that she decides to keep her costume on for the walk home with Jem, hiding her shame in the dark.
Which turns out to be crucially important.
Fatefully important. So Jem and Scout start walking home alone in the pitch dark, after the pageant in Chapter 28. Scout's still in her ham costume.
And they realize they're being followed.
Yes. They hear someone shuffling behind them, think it's maybe Cecil Jacobs trying to scare them again. But the footsteps keep pace, stopping when they stop. They realize it's not a game.
And then the attack happens.
Suddenly, near the Radley place, under the dark oak tree, their pursuer rushes at them. Jem yells for Scout to run. There's a struggle. Scout gets knocked down, tangled in her costume. She hears Jem cry out in pain. She hears struggling, horrible sounds, coughing.
It's Ewell.
It's Bob Ewell, drunk and armed with a knife, tried to kill Atticus's children as his ultimate revenge. He attacks Jem first, breaking his arm badly. Scout hears a crunching sound. He then turns on Scout, trying to crush her inside the chicken wire costume.
The costume saves her.
The costume saves her life. The chicken wire deflects the knife, protects her body. But she's trapped, terrified. And then suddenly there's another person there.
Someone pulls Ewell off.
Yes. Scout feels Ewell being yanked backwards. There's more struggling, a heavy, core-faking sound, and then silence. Except for the sound of someone breathing heavily, painfully. Scout stumbles towards home, calling for Jem. She sees a figure carrying Jem towards their house.
Who is it? Does she know?
She doesn't recognize him in the dark. She gets home. Atticus calls Dr. Reynolds and Heck Kate. Dr. Reynolds examines Jem, finds his arm is badly broken near the elbow, a compound fracture. Jem is unconscious.
And Ewell.
Heck Tate arrives and goes back to the scene. He returns and tells Atticus, Bob Ewell's lying on the ground under that tree down yonder with a kitchen knife stuck up under his ribs. He's dead, Mr. Finch.
So the mysterious figure saved them and killed Ewell, and Scout finally sees who it is.
Yes. In the chaos and dim light of Jem's bedroom, Scout finally looks properly at the man standing silently in the corner, the man who carried Jem home. She describes him as pale, thin, with colorless eyes, unsurely indoors, and she recognizes him. Hey, Boo, she said softly.
Arthur Radley. He came out.
He came out when he heard the children scream. He saved their lives. Dr. Reynolds, showing that typical Maycomb pragmatism even in shock, just greets him casually. Evening, Arthur. Didn't notice you the first time I was here.
So Boo Radley saved the children, and Bob Ewell is dead. The immediate question is what actually happened under that tree. Chapter 30 deals with this.
Right. Atticus, Hectate, Scout, and Boo are all gathered in the living room after Dr. Reynolds puts Jem to bed. Atticus immediately assumes Jem must have killed Ewell in the struggle, defending himself and Scout.
He thinks Jem is responsible.
Yes, and Atticus, being Atticus, insists they have to report it honestly. He says he won't have Jem living under the shadow of a cover-up. He wants the truth out, even if it means Jem facing legal consequences. He's adamant about sticking to the letter of the law. I don't want him growing up with a whisper about him, he says.
But Heck Tate disagrees. The sheriff sees it differently.
Strongly disagrees. Heck, Tate knows exactly what happened. He points out Ewell's own knife was likely knocked away in the struggle. The knife found under Ewell's ribs, the one that killed him. It's a kitchen knife.
Not Ewell's knife.
Heck implies it's Boo's knife. He understands Boo Radley intervened, saved the children, and killed Ewell in the process. But Heck refuses to let that become public knowledge.
Why? Why cover it up?
To protect Boo. Heck argues vehemently that dragging the incredibly shy, reclusive Arthur Radley into the limelight, forcing him through investigations, hearings, maybe even a trial, would be a terrible cruelty. He says, "To my way of thinking, Mr. Finch, taking the one man who's done you and this town a great service and dragging him with his shy ways into the limelight, to me, that's a sin."
A sin?
Yes. He says it would be like shooting a mockingbird, using that central metaphor of the book, that it's wrong to harm innocent creatures who only do good, like mockingbirds who just sing. Boo, in this instance, is the mockingbird. Exposing him to public scrutiny for his heroic act would be fundamentally wrong, unjust.
So what's Heck Tate's official story gonna be?
He's emphatic. "I'm still sheriff of Macomb County, and Bob Ewell fell on his knife. Good night, sir." He creates the official narrative right there. Ewell, in his drunken stumbling attack, tripped and fell on his own kitchen knife. End of story. Self-inflicted. Case closed.
He's deliberately falsifying the report to ensure moral justice, even if it bends the legal truth.
Exactly. It's a huge moment. The law failed Tom Robinson, convicted an innocent man based on prejudice. Now, the chief lawman of the county is choosing to subvert the legal process to protect another innocent man, Boo Radley, from the potential cruelty of that same system and the public gaze.
Does Atticus accept this? It goes against his principles.
He struggles with it for a moment. He looks at Boo, looks at Scout. He asks Scout if she understands, and Scout, who has been listening quietly, surprises him. She says she understands. She says, well, it'd be sort of like shooting a mockingbird, wouldn't it?
She gets it. She sees the moral necessity of the cover-up.
She completely gets it. Hearing it from Scout seems to be the final confirmation for Atticus. He accepts Heck Tate's version. The legal system failed once. They won't let it fail Arthur Radley.
And then Scout has one final interaction with Boo in Chapter 31.
Yes. Boo wants to say goodnight to Jem. Scout leads him into Jem's room. Boo just touches Jem's hair gently. Then he whispers, his voice raspy like someone who rarely speaks, asking Scout if she'll take him home.
She walks him home.
She does. She takes his arm, leads him across the street to the Radley house. He goes inside, closes the door, and she never sees him again.
But standing on his porch gives her a new perspective.
It's the final, crucial insight of the book. Standing on the Radley porch, looking out at her own house, the street, the neighborhood, Scout suddenly sees the events of the past few years from Boo's perspective. She sees the children playing, the gifts in the tree, the fire, the attack, all from his viewpoint, the silent watcher.
Atticus was right all along.
Atticus was right. You never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. Sal finally does that, literally and figuratively, on Boo Radley's porch. She understands his isolation, his quiet protection, his humanity. It's the culmination of her journey from innocent childhood assumptions to a more complex, empathetic understanding of the world and the people in it. The book ends with Atticus reading to her, reinforcing the themes of empathy and understanding. Hashtag tag tag outro.
Wow, so going through it like that, this deep dive into To Kill a Mockingbird, really just confirms how rich it is. The genius truly lies in that incredible character detail and the way the themes weave through everything.
It really does. You see courage defined in so many ways, don't you? There's Atticus's public stand, facing down prejudice and risking everything.
Right. And then Mrs. Dubos's intensely private battle against addiction, the internal fight.
And Boo's the courage to overcome immense fear and reclusiveness to save those children, even knowing the potential cost.
And we see the flip side, too, the failures. The failure of the court system so clearly through Scout and Jem's innocent eyes, their slow, really painful realization that the systems they believed in, that Macomb itself, are deeply flawed, deeply broken.
Absolutely. Which brings us back to that central conflict, doesn't it? Atticus's belief, stated in his closing argument, a court is only as sound as its jury, and a jury is only as sound as the men who make it up.
A powerful ideal.
An ideal that the system spectacularly failed in Tom Robinson's case. It punished him ultimately for the crime of feeling pity based entirely on prejudice, not evidence.
But then the very end of the book flips that. The system, in the form of Sheriff Heck Tate, actively works against the literal truth to achieve a different kind of justice.
Exactly. The sheriff knowingly breaks the law, falsifies a report to save an innocent man, Boo Radley. It leads to that final, really provocative thought, doesn't it? If a court of law the official system fails to deliver actual justice as it did for Tom, is breaking the law, or at least bending it significantly, sometimes the only way to ensure moral justice for a quiet, vulnerable neighbor like Boo.
That tension between legal justice and moral justice, it's powerful.
It is, and I think that enduring, uncomfortable question is precisely why we're still talking about, still debating, still deeply diving into this novel all these decades later.